Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Reclaiming Fertility Joy, Healing the Broken Spirit of Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. I am your host, Corey Ray Kovacs, registered nurse and women's wellness mentor and educator. I am joined today by this amazing person that I have got to know. This is Anabelle Clebaner. She is a registered dietitian, functional nutritionist, and your new fertility BFF. She is passionate about helping women thrive during preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum. She personally has dealt with irregular and painful cycles and hormones that were a mess. She understands the stress and the emotional toll it takes when you're struggling with fertility. She can't wait to show you how to reduce the stress and overwhelm while trying to conceive. Well, we're so glad to have you here, Annabelle. I'm so happy to have you a part of the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat today.
It's been amazing, just really kind of getting to dig and dive into these topics that are really important to those of us who have polycystic ovarian syndrome and or are struggling to, to conceive or in the kind of fertility journey. And I love that you have this kind of unique perspective as a registered dietitian because so much of what we tackle in PCOS is nutrition related. And, it like we keep saying it's not a reproductive issue. This is a whole body issue. And the nutrition aspect is really important. So I would love to hear and for you to share with everybody kind of what's your mission in supporting women through their fertility journey. And yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I work mostly with women during the reproductive years. I mostly work with women who have PCOS, endometriosis, unexplained infertility, secondary infertility, thyroid issues. So just like a whole host of things. But really, I work with people who are looking for answers, which a lot of times they're going from different providers to get answers. They're being met with band-aid solutions or given, just short-term solutions that aren't really working for them or plain like bad advice. So my goal is really to just educate as many women as I can on how to support their hormones through nutrition and a food as medicine approach.
Mm.
And I know how powerful this can be. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it with my clients. I think, yeah, we kind of, A, we're not taught about this stuff. And B, a lot of us have lost that connection and really reclaiming that you have more control over your body and you also have this internal wisdom as well.
Mhm. I really love that. You mentioned the connection to food. It really is such a driver for us and how we interact with the world, how we socialize, how we and it really plays into the part of the relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think food is complex, right? There's social aspects of food, religious aspects of food, cultural things,
Mm-hmm.
not to mention diet culture or things that we've learned and have to unlearn as adults. There's so much to food, but really just getting back to that food as medicine and food as nourishing and really thinking about food as supporting your body and supporting your baby's development rather than looking at food as the enemy or something that you have to restrict or cut or limit yourself on.
It's really difficult, especially sometimes, when we're going through this process, we realize that there are some foods that are more challenging with us when we have sensitivities or things like that, or just not really knowing how to eat that supports us in a way that makes us feel good. And I know, like, certainly in my own personal journey, like that has been a world of discovery from discovering, sensitivity to dairy specifically, and how that changed, like from when I was a kid to when I was adult, and all and adjustments because Mama loves cheese. I love cheese. It's one of my things, and I know that a lot of people talk about that. So let's talk a little bit about, you're talking about, this kind of complex relationship. So let's talk a little bit when people do find things that they are sensitive to or things that just don't make them feel good, like gluten or dairy or, other things maybe that they have sensitivities to, or even allergies to. How do you, can you talk about how these foods may be affecting us with PCOS, and kind of a general understanding about these kind of particular um, foods that can stimulate inflammation in the body?
Yes. So, I mean, certainly for some people that have either lactose intolerance or gluten sensitivities or celiac, then yes, in that situation, cutting out those foods makes the most sense for your specific body.
Mhm.
However, my approach is that not everyone across the board needs to cut those things out. And for a lot of people, cutting out gluten, it might give them, like success with their diet because
Mhm.
they're mindful of the foods that they're eating. They're incorporating more fruits and vegetables. They're including the things that we want, but it doesn't mean that you have to exclude
Mhm.
gluten. There's
Mhm.
nothing bad about it.
Mhm.
Um, but I do find that sometimes people will say to me, I cut out gluten and I've lost weight or my acne's
Mhm.
improved. Something's happening. And yes, that's true, but we're looking at like overall dietary patterns.
Mhm.
And dairy, for some people, that can be really inflammatory. It can,
Sure.
contribute to more cystic acne in some people, but again, not across the board. So that's kind of my approach, where I'm never going to say, everyone, you have to cut out this food 100% of the time. I'm more of like taking an individualized approach. For some people, dairy is, it gives them vitamin A, vitamin D, calcium, all these things, especially if they're getting it organic or raw, there's good options. And then for someone else, that dairy is going to cause like a whole cascade of inflammation for them. So it's
Mhm.
tailoring your nutrition. And if someone is telling you, I've had doctors tell me, just cut out gluten and dairy and this and that. And it's like, well, is that
It's
is that really that is like,
it's really not sustainable. It's if it's not something that's specifically affecting you on a massive level, which I mean everybody's different, and that's why taking bio individuality, like looking at people by case basis and seeing how it interacts with them, um which sometimes temporary, kind of like if you know something is causing a sensitivity in you, sometimes a temporary stepping away from that and then reintroducing it is one thing. But just like saying flat out, yeah, you got to cut this, cut gluten, cut dairy, cut this, cut that, then you really do complicate that relationship with food. um
and yeah, and I think it can work. Like I've done Whole30 before.
I've done it a few times myself.
I don't know anyone who stays on Whole30
I
3
can't.
times. Like, so that's kind of, if you want to play around with things and test things out and do elimination diets, like I have nothing against that.
Yeah.
I'm just about the sustainability approach. Like,
Right.
what can we do? What habits can we implement that's going
Mhm.
to last beyond the time that we work together, for
True.
a whole life? Because nutrition is for your whole life. So
Yes.
find something that works.
We're really stepping away from this diet mentality and moving into a lifestyle mentality. I mean, and that's, PCOS is we're in the long game here. This is a lifelong commitment. And so you have to find the things that are sustainable for you, based on your culture, your social interactions, and what you're able to, I mean, also your social economic, um, you know, capabilities. I mean, that plays a huge role in especially with how prices are changing with groceries and things like that. So, um, affordability is also something that is very important as well when taking into consideration. So, um, you know, meeting people where they're at and really kind of coming to a place and saying, let's not have this whole blanket. Let's see what works and apply that so that way they can have the most success in taking care of their health.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned something about listen, like it's something kind of spurred in me about listening to your body when you're feeding yourself. This is something that I feel is so important, is really like understanding that our body responds to things when we eat. How do you kind of help people like understand like their hunger cues or how things make them feel, or just kind of picking up on those things, especially when they're making initial changes?
Yeah. So I used to do a lot in like mindful eating. So we can talk
Mm.
about this for a while.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
The first thing is like getting quiet, right? So like maybe even closing your eyes if that's helpful, and like just tune into your body. So you know that feeling of extreme fullness. So think like Thanksgiving dinner when you've
Mm.
eaten a lot and you're stretched and you're really, really full, right?
And uncomfortable. Yeah, it's like
And then you also know that feeling where maybe you've skipped meals or you're like traveling or working and you've totally went the whole day without eating and suddenly you're starving. That's the whole other end of the spectrum, right? So you can kind of remember what that feels like and then just aiming to be in the middle, right? So not
Mm.
painfully full, but not starving. And just a really easy way to do that is to, after a meal, to take a few breaths and check in with yourself. A lot of people will report like mood swings or anxiety or different things, and like having that awareness as well, even like waking up at night, that can be a sign of blood sugar imbalances. So
Mhm.
those things that you might be used to or feels normal can actually be related to your food and what you're eating.
Mm. That's really interesting, that the idea of like waking up in the middle of the night. Sometimes like we we might take something to help us sleep, like, or we'll talk to the doctor, hey, I'm having trouble sleeping at night, and I know as a nurse that's one of those questions we ask a lot, like, how's your sleeping, are you getting up at night, because there's a lot of things that it could be related to, and blood sugar is absolutely one of those things that if you're not, if your eating patterns are not supporting your blood sugar with sustainability, especially through the night when you're sleeping, then yeah, absolutely, your body's going to wake you up and say, oh my gosh, I'm freaking starving here, you got to do something because my blood sugar's crashing, right?
Right.
And so just even tuning into that, and taking note of that is really great, a great way to just support your body and to be able to give that feedback so that way you can make adjustments as necessary.
Another thing I want to add is just like feeling hungry throughout the day. So if
Mhm.
you feel like you're constantly snacking or you're grazing, you're constantly hangry, you have sugar cravings, you need something sweet after dinner, those are also signs related to either not eating enough or not eating enough like protein in relation to carbohydrates, which will impact your blood sugar. It makes you hangry. It makes you want to eat all day long. So those are also things to just like be mindful of, especially with PCOS.
Mhm. You mentioned the protein and carbohydrates. I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about macros and just kind of understand how those play a part. I feel like this is something we don't learn. We don't learn about what this plate is supposed to look like. I mean, I grew up with the food pyramid, right? And that was not helpful for me at all, because I would have all of these things, especially carbohydrates, and then in the morning I would get shaky and I would, like basically have hypoglycemic episodes because I wasn't having protein in the morning. So
Right.
let's talk about these macros and how they can support us in longevity and support us with our with PCOS. Okay.
Okay, so when it comes to macros, and this again can all be tailored and individualized to each person, but essentially we want them balanced, right? We want to have enough protein, enough carbs, and enough fat. What happens when we have too many carbohydrates? So, like in the situation of eating a high carb breakfast, for
Mhm.
example, if you're eating oatmeal with banana and honey and I don't know what else, a cup of orange juice. I don't know why you would do that, but
Sure.
let's just say that is all carbohydrates, right? And so this is actually something that I used to deal with way back when. I would have oatmeal every single morning and I would eat it at my desk in my cubicle. And then by 10 a.m., I was hungry and I ate my lunch at my desk. And then, that was all the food that I had for the day.
Hmm.
Maybe you've experienced this too, where you eat and then you're still hungry like
Yeah,
an hour or two later.
absolutely.
really good sign that you did not eat enough protein and fat in your meal. So when
Mm.
you're through like, how do I structure my meals, or what do I eat, especially for PCOS and like balancing blood sugar and hormones, you want to first think about, where is my protein source?
Mm.
Is it eggs? Is it tofu? Is it whatever it is? Is it dairy? And then add in some sort of fat and your carbohydrates. Carbohydrates we usually get enough of based on
Mhm.
just dietary patterns and our food system, but really just being cognizant of where your protein is coming from. And then an added benefit would be like, where's my fiber, right? Are you having any
Mhm.
veggies with your meals? Those are the things that to make it super simple, that's like what I would recommend thinking about first.
That's actually one of the things that I loved about Whole30 is maybe not the, I get the whole cutting thing, but the idea of eating and changing my breakfast and
Mhm.
how I thought about my breakfast and eat like pushing the vegetables and changing how I kind of structured my food to make sure that I was having a significant amount of protein. I got really used to eating salads for breakfast. Like I have like this morning, I one of my favorite things is like a bed of fresh spinach with sauteed peppers and onions. And I love to season them with garlic because I love garlic. It's so delicious. And then I'll put eggs on top with a little balsamic vinegar and maybe some fruit and coconut milk in my coffee. And it's
Mhm.
like, so learning like this, finding things that bring me joy, that, because eating is a part of us. So finding ways to get more vegetables in and incorporating those into breakfast, I found was a great way to get myself started. Because then I'm like, hey, I've got 2 or 3 servings of veggies here right off the bat. That's great. I'm getting a good start to the day. So,
Yeah. Another easy way to think about it is like, can you include 3 different colors on your plate?
I love colorful plates.
Yeah, it's a good way to think through like, okay, I have like eggs and spinach, but can I add bell peppers and mushrooms
Hmm.
or something else? And then we're all about like incorporating more. It's not
Hmm.
food away. I'm not talking about taking anything away. I'm talking about what can we add in
Yes.
to make you feel, full, nourished,
Oh,
happy, satisfied,
yes.
throughout
Absolutely.
all of that.
Hmm. It's funny because like I'll let my woo-woo show a little bit. I love to like kind of coordinate my colors with my chakras. So I'm like, oh, I need to support my solar plexus chakra today. So I'm gonna have yellow pepper or
That is
but
amazing.
it is
That's a
so much
whole
fun.
other level than I
It's like
am.
a whole other level. It's kind of funny because it's like it's turned into a ritual for me. Like preparing my food, all kind of like silliness aside, that's just kind of a part of me and my goofiness, but all like turning food and making food into a ritual and really being present with what you're doing. Like you were talking about mindful eating, you bringing yourself back to this point where I'm interacting with this food and this food is bringing me nourishment. How can I, bring gratitude to myself for preparing, this food, or even thanking the people that made this food possible for me to be eating right now. It's really like kind of become a almost an experience. And I don't get to do it all the time, obviously. Time, but usually on the weekends I like to kind of have this whole thing. But that's really it is really important to find the foods that you love, to see that we're not restricting, we're not taking all this stuff away. Is like, okay, what am I having? And this is kind of a paradigm shift, to what can I have? What how can I make this plate beautiful? How can I enjoy this? Because this is life. This is, I mean, we spend half our lives eating and the other part sleeping. So I mean, let's bring something to that really brings that enjoyment, because then you're more likely to keep it up, to want to do that rather than kind of, doing the not the easy way out, but I understand we have busy lives. But when you're taking the time to prepare your meals, then there's some magic that's kind of instilled into that instead of just always going through the drive-through during lunch or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I don't want people to feel like, oh my God, I have to cook every single meal from
Mm-mm,
scratch every single day. Like that's not my approach at all. But
mm-mm.
do agree with you that when you do start cooking more for yourself, you're going to naturally be eating healthier things.
Hmm.
But even if you're out, like you can still make good choices
Yeah.
and also enjoy, a birthday cake or whatever it is, like a family barbecue. Like none
Hmm.
of that is to say that you need to overhaul your entire life. That's
Mm-mm.
not my approach at all.
No, it's, you're making choices that support you, but you're also making choices because this is your life. So make the choices that fit for you and still, go and enjoy a family dinner. But, when you're doing it, be mindful about what you're eating, like because you're practicing those things. And so you get to, still have the fun and still have the enjoyment while still supporting yourself and your health. Um, yeah, this is really a fantastic conversation. I'm enjoying this. Let's talk a little bit about insulin resistance.
Mhm.
We know that 70 to even 80% of those diagnosed with PCOS has some form or some level of insulin resistance. So this is a topic that is really a big deal for those of us that have PCOS. And we also know that insulin resistance can be a precursor to developing things like type 2 diabetes. So I would love to talk a little bit about how we can approach this particular root cause or this particular challenge and support our health and kind of help to heal this insulin resistance that we have through our nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, insulin resistance is a driving factor for and even even women who don't have
Mhm.
PCOS, many of us struggle with insulin resistance
Yeah.
because it's just, again, part of our food system and the way that we tend to eat. I remember seeing a stat, it was like 80% of people experience blood sugar ranges in the pre-diabetic range for at least
Mm.
a day, right? So most people are dealing with this. And the trouble with excess insulin is that it leads to more like common PCOS symptoms. So like excess testosterone,
Mhm.
facial hair, anovulation, excess fat storage, higher luteinizing hormone,
Mhm.
acne, hypertension, infertility. So all of these things um, are related back to insulin resistance. And the best way to address this is through nutrition. So exactly like what we were talking about before with understanding your carbs, your carb tolerance, how much protein you need, making sure you're eating enough healthy fats, all of that's going to impact insulin resistance. Now, with PCOS, your body has a harder time digesting and absorbing carbohydrates.
Mhm.
So your friend who's eating, a sandwich for lunch, that might be fine for them. But for you or for someone with PCOS, that might actually be too many
Too
carbs. So
much. Mhm.
understand your specific like needs and your carb tolerance is really important with PCOS. And again, we're not saying that you cannot have a sandwich, but are you having more protein in there? Are you having a side salad? Are you including some avocado and healthy fats? Just something else to balance out those carbs. And then, of course, if you're working with like a practitioner, you can add in different supplements to help with this.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that off the bat, everyone with PCOS needs metformin or
Mhm.
medication for this. It really is something that can be managed with diet and lifestyle. And that's the other part of it is like including strength training in your
Mhm.
exercise routine that can drastically impact insulin. In fact, exercise has like the same biochemical effect on insulin as metformin does.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
that's such a huge component. I'm really glad you brought that other aspect too, because while there's so much in our nutrition and what we're eating, but moving our body and getting that movement, the walking, as well as exercises and strength training. I mean, there's so many benefits that are to that in our bodies beyond even just our PCOS. But yeah, it helps with our insulin resistance. It helps keeps our bones strong. For that eventual menopause levels at the end, it eventually. So it keeps your muscles strong, it keeps you flexible, it helps prevent injury. There's so many benefits, especially particularly to strength training. So, there's so many resources out here too, as well as if you've never done anything like strength training before, I know that can feel very daunting. So there's a plethora of free resources on YouTube for people that are just getting started. I know um, it's one of those things that just getting started sometimes can be difficult. So as far as like mindset goes, when it comes to making these changes, how do we support ourselves and understanding that when we're making these shifts, like how do we kind of get into the right mindset to be making these changes in our life?
I was watching a YouTube video about mindset last night,
I love
actually.
it.
This is going on perfectly.
It's
But the
great.
saying, like, um, it really comes down to like the quality of the questions you ask yourself.
Mm,
So instead of being like, why am I so fat? Oh, because I'm lazy and I don't
mhm,
go to the gym or I make bad choices, right? Instead, what can you ask yourself to to be motivating, right? Like, what can I do today to support my body?
love that.
Or um, what's something that I did this past week that I'm proud of? Just like those simple mindset shifts can be really helpful when you're making big changes like this. And then the other thing is your like frustration tolerance. So whenever we start something new, there's going to be a level of frustration.
Mm,
Beginners, and we don't like that feeling of being a beginner or feeling frustrated because it's new, right? It impacts the ego.
mm-hmm,
Whole, like there's a lot of emotions that come up, right? So we will say like, oh, I'll just put it off, or I'm not going to do it, or whatever it is. Like
mm.
now for me, I'm learning a new test that I'm including in my practice that I'm going to be using with clients.
Oh, I
And
love
it's
that.
because I don't know what I'm doing and I'm so used to being the expert. And
Yes.
but having higher frustration tolerance and even telling yourself, like, you're a beginner, it's okay. You don't know what you're doing, and that's fine, but just keep going. Just keep taking like one step after another.
Hmm.
Those are just some things that come up for me right now. Especially after watching that video last
I
night, but
love
I'm
that.
true.
Well, it is kind of like I love to kind of help people like realize that they're in relationship with themselves, like their bodies, like developing this part of themselves and seeing that we have this amazing opportunity to get to know ourselves better and to help support ourselves. And so like kind of what you said is like, one of the things I love to do is help people stand in front of the mirror. And it's like it can be very kind of like frightening sometimes because especially if we struggle with weight or we're really having a hard time relating with ourselves, there's some kind of things that need released at that point. Usually there's lots of tears. There's usually lots of tears when it comes to that. But like beyond that is this ability to see that, hey, I have an opportunity to love myself and to support myself and see that, oh, what can I do to bring myself joy today? What can I do to support my body instead of, why am I so lazy? Why am I so fat? Why, like all of these things that you were just talking about. It really does I don't know, it makes you feel so much better. It really does because we beat ourselves up. There's so much pressure on us to perform, to be all the best, the expert all the time, know everything, be on our A game all the time. So when we're, the one of the best things we can do is just be gentle with ourselves, especially when we start making these changes. Be gentle with yourself and understand that you're new and it's going to take time and it's going to take practice. And if you made a decision that maybe wasn't, you know, how you would view as supporting yourself, then don't just like throw in the towel and say, "Oh, that's it. I suck. I'm never gonna, be successful at this. I guess I'm just gonna live with this." Like, don't do that. Just come back to yourself and say, "Okay, what can I do now? What can I do to support myself now?" And then just keep moving forward from there.
I think one of the best tips I've heard is like, how would you talk to your best friend?
Mm-hmm. Yes. How would you talk to your best friend? Because honestly, I mean, this is the relationship you got for your whole life. You know, from
Right.
the day you're born until the day you die. This is it. And
Yeah,
is this
it
this
is. And it's not like, you don't need to compare yourself to anyone on
Mm,
or
no.
influencers or whoever. It's like it's you versus you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the long game, you know, it's just for you. And so like
Yeah.
what can you do to support yourself and nourish yourself, take back some of that control and like
Hmm.
confidence in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that confidence is just because then when you come from this place of confidence, then you can, when you do face these struggles in life, right? Like these struggles of fertility or challenges in your relationships or with your career or anything, any of these challenges, now you're coming from this place to say, I have been successful. I am successful in what I do because I support myself. And so you feel that confidence and are able to approach these challenges with that confidence, with that self-love, with that strength that comes from inside. And that really, in my opinion, only comes from developing that relationship with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would love to talk a little bit about what your amazing gift is that you're offering to everybody here at the virtual summit. You have it's called the Wellspring Nutrition Fertility Guide. Would you like to share a little bit about what's in that? And
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. It's just like a preconception checklist, things to start thinking about and include when you're on your fertility journey, as well as things to avoid. So
okay.
pretty straightforward guide and just something you could print off, put on your fridge and kind of like take it off as you go.
Absolutely love that. So, of course, you've offered so much great advice. And if any of the viewers would like to get a hold of you and ask any questions or work with you one-on-one, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
So you can follow me on Instagram. My handle's at TTC Dietitian. And my website is wellspringnutrition.co. We have a number of things that you can get into. We have meal plans, courses, group programs, and then one-on-one coaching as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I would love, Annabelle, for you to leave our listeners with just one last piece of inspirational advice or insight that you have to help kind of bring them back to hope and to joy here in this present moment.
Um, yeah. Sorry, can I ask you a question?
It's okay. Go ahead.
Is it like fertility specific?
Yeah, we could talk. Yeah, fertility. So I'll re-ask the question and we'll kind of start from there. Okay. All right. Um, Okay, so Annabelle, before we leave, I'd love to hear one last little inspirational piece of advice that you would give to someone with PCOS who's trying to conceive, maybe struggling with fertility right now, that could bring them back to hope and joy right here in this moment.
Yeah, so I would say that you have more control over this than maybe your doctors are telling you right now, that you can and you will balance your hormones and regulate
Mhm.
your cycle and get pregnant. I know this is true because you have the intention set that you
Mhm.
want to be a mom, a mother, and it will happen. We don't know how this journey is going to look or what form that will take, but I know that if you want this in your life, which I'm sure you do because you're here, then
Yeah,
it will happen. So I just want to hold that vision for everyone here.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Annabelle. It's been a pleasure, and we will talk soon.
Thank you.